Assalamu alaikum. We'll begin in just 1 minute, inshallah. All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina wa Nabina wa Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Bidnillahi ta'ala, hopefully everybody can hear me okay, inshallah. We're coming to you from my office rather than the masjid, with the hope being that last year we had started with a tafsir of Surah Yusuf. However, I was told, particularly by the sisters, that it's difficult to come to the masjid around this time. So it's far better for us to have something online. So inshallah, we're going to have this online. We'll be just doing a short live stream, probably about 30 minutes total. We'll still leave plenty of time. But next week we will move to 6:30, inshallah. That way, when we're finishing up, we'll be finishing up right around closer to iftar time, about 15, 20 minutes before iftar time. So the plan is to go through Surah Fatihah. We will have 3 sessions, inshallah. And this first session is going to be kind of a precursor of the surah. So discussing kind of before the surah, if you will. Next week, we'll go into half of it. And then the final week, inshallah, we'll go into the latter half of Surah Al-Fatiha. And Surah Al-Fatiha is I guess we'll go ahead and begin, inshallah. But Surah Al-Fatiha is a Meccan surah. It is a surah that was revealed when the Prophet ﷺ was living still in the city of Mecca. It's not that it was revealed in Mecca. When we say a surah is Makki or Madani, this refers to the fact that a surah is revealed at a time before Hijrah, which is then it's Makki. And if it's revealed after the Hijrah, when the Prophet ﷺ had moved to Medina, then it's a Madani surah. So Surah Fatiha, as most of us know, is a Makki surah. And in order to really talk about what this surah is, we have to talk first about what we do before the surah. Because none of us begin simply saying, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim, siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim, ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. We don't just start out saying that, right? There's a process. And before we begin with our thana, even we do our Allahu Akbar. We begin with after the thana, then we say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. This is what we call the isti'adha. Isti'adha it comes from the Arabic verb a'udh, awada, and in Arabic this term refers to protection, basically, to be on guard from. And isti'adha in here, when you talk about isti'adha, it means to seek out protection. So when we begin, we say a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. So we say that I seek refuge. We're using the first person. In Arabic, it's wahid mutakallim. And we say that I am seeking refuge. A'udhu billahi, with Allah, minash shaitanir rajim. So it's the first person verb, and I'm saying that I'm seeking out this protection from Allah. From what? Ash-shaytan al-rajim. Shaitan comes from the word shatana. Shatana is the verb itself, the root letters are shatana, and then the plural of shaitan is shayatin. Shatana refers to something that is dangerous. So classically, the way that they would give reference to this is with, for example, a well. So if you ever been in a community or seen a place where they have wells, even if, for example, if you've gone to the city of the Prophet ﷺ, gone to Medina, if you've gone to Masjid Quba, where there is a well there that interestingly enough, that the ring of Uthman radiallahu an was lost in. Um, Anytime you see a well that's no longer in use, that well, there's a few different things that they do with it. They either cover it up, they seal it so that no longer is there any way to access it. Because the fear you have in general with a well, when you have just an open pit with water underneath it, people can fall in, right? One of the most interesting narrations is a very funny narration, in fact. It's kind of a dark humor narration, if you will. But the companions were praying behind the Prophet ﷺ, and as they were praying, they kind of saw in their peripheral vision that there was a blind brother, there was a blind man who was walking, and he fell into a well because he didn't see it. And they started laughing. They busted out laughing during the salah. The companions did. So after the salah was finished, the Prophet ﷺ turned around and he told them, go make your wudu again and then go pray again. And so this is where we get the ruling that if you laugh loudly during salah, you have to actually not only go pray again, but you have to make your wudu again. So it's just an anecdote, but a well can be dangerous. And what they do with a well when it's completed or when it's no longer giving any water is that they will seal it. They'll cover it up. They'll break down perhaps the layers and then cover it up. Or sometimes they'll even fill it with dirt, right? So the well will be filled up and taken care of so that it's decommissioned, basically. But when that hasn't happened, let's say a well, very recently, just finished up giving water and no longer is it working, but it hasn't yet been covered up or it hasn't yet had water, or excuse me, dirt filled into it, then they used to refer to it as bi'run shatun, that is a dangerous well. So the shatan, the shatana, the root verb, it gives reference to danger. And when we understand who shaitan is, this makes a lot of sense, right? Because shaitan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly says in the Quran that innahu lakum aduwwun mubin, that he is for you a clear enemy. Like, it's not a matter of maybe, oh, can I, or is redeemable? No, clear without any kind of doubt or any kind of issue. He's a clear enemy to the believers. So when you have something that's dangerous, his name literally then gives reference to what he is, which is dangerous to the believers. And through this, it's giving reference to the fact that we must be very careful. So a'udhu billahi, I seek refuge with Allah, mina shaitani, from the dangerous one, from the one who is actively seeking to harm me, to harm my family, the believers, to harm those who have any desire to do goodness. This is the one who's doing that. And then al-rajim. Al-rajim is on the pattern of fa'il. In the Arabic language, when we have we have the different patterns for words, and typically the default pattern that they use is the word fa'ala. So if you're looking at a pattern and you see that they're slightly different, you insert the letters fa'ain lam into these positions, and then you have fa'il, for example. Now you replace the fa'ain lam with the three root letters of whatever verb you're giving reference to. So, for example, here we see we're talking about rajam, right? So rajama means to throw. So rajim means the one who is tossed out, the one who's rejected, who's thrown away or something of that nature. So when we talk about shaitan, when something is marjum, then it is rejected, it's thrown away, it's completely just banished, basically. And so this is shaitan. Shaitan is rejected. He's devoid from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Part of our what we do is that we recite the ta'awud, as we call it, or isti'adha, when we are beginning to recite the Quran, right? This is part of our culture. This is part of what we do. And we part of the reason that we do this, where does this come from? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Nahl, for example, He says, فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. The very, very simple, words here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when you recite the Quran, فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ, then seek refuge. When you begin to recite the Quran, seek refuge with Allah from a shaitan al-rajim. So it's a clear command in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says in Surah Al-Mu'minun, idfa' billati hiya ahsanu sayyi'ah, nahnu a'lamu bima yasifun. So then we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also saying that repel that which is evil with that which is far better. Right? Now, this is going to get into a little bit of a conversation in terms of when we seek refuge from shaitan, a shaitan al-wajim, who are we seeking refuge from? Obviously, there's the shaitan that we know of. There's the shaitan who is Iblis, the one who does, who whispers it and gives these things. And right now he's locked up, right? So right now we're okay. But we still say, even in the month of Ramadan, despite his being locked up, in order to keep this habit, we say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Mu'minun says, it, as I mentioned, that repel that which with that which is evil with that which is better. Nahnu a'lamu bima yasifun. We know very well, Allah is saying, with that what they are saying. We know what they're the disgusting nature of what they're saying, the evil things, the wrong things that they're saying to you. وَقُلْ رَبِّ أَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنْ هَمَزَاتِ الشَّيَاطِينِ. And say that Ya Allah, I seek refuge with you from the incitements, from the inspirings of the shayateen. وَأَعُوذُ بِكَ رَبِّ أَنْ يَحْضَرُونَ. And I seek refuge that they be around me, that they be come to me, or be all around me. So what the scholars tell us is that it refers to two types of shayateen in this world. The first is shayateen al-jinn, right? That's the one that we know. Shayateen al-jinn, which is to say that we have, for example, Iblis, that his followers, his cronies, they are the ones who we typically seek refuge from with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there's nobody else who can help us with that. You cannot go out and fight with Iblis. You cannot fight with Shaitan, because he's an enemy that you can't see and you cannot perceive him. And so because of that, there is no real way for you to combat this individual except one way: you seek refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what repels him. This is what keeps him away. And so when we have shayateen al-jinn, we say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, and this keeps them away. But then there's another side, which is shayateen al-ins, which is to say the shayateen of the people, right? The people. We have this reality, unfortunately, that shayateen are not just those jinn that are running amok and doing these evil things, but they are also people. They're, for example, you see in the life of the Prophet ﷺ that we have Abu Jahl, the Fir'aun of this ummah. We also have, of course, in Musa alayhi salam's time, Fir'aun himself. These are people who not only did evil, but called to evil, inspired evil, tried to push people in terms of their evil. And when it comes to us, the Prophet ﷺ is being given very clear instructions. How do we deal with these types of people? How do we avoid them? Or what is it that we're supposed to do to combat them? Because when it comes to Iblis, you can't combat him in the common sense. You can't just simply say, I'm going to fight. You can't square up and say, come on, Iblis, let's go. It's not how it works. But when it comes to the people, you, of course, could do that. You could square up. You could start to fight with someone. But this is not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us toward. Idfa' billati hiya ahsanu sayyi'ah. Repel with that which is better than their evil. Have honor and dignity in all that you do. Allah is saying, Nahnu a'lamu bima yasifun. I know exactly what it is they're doing. You think that I don't know what they're saying to you, the wrong things and the evil things and the things that are being done and said that are clear lies, or are being done to harm people in a way that is, very obviously to their benefit. And we see this also with our brothers and sisters in Palestine. We have to be mindful of the reality that there are people like this. But how do we deal with those types of people? What do we do in that situation? Idfa' billati hiya ahsanu sayyi'ah. Repel their evil with that which is far better than that. Repel with their evil with that which is far better than that. Right? Think about it in a way that is in line with what the Prophet ﷺ did. Think about it in a way that is making sure that you are responding not in a way that lowers you or demeans you or brings you down to their level, but you respond with dignity and honor. And when it comes to then for Shaitan himself, Iblis himself, then make sure that you ask Allah to protect you from them, because there is no way to protect otherwise from that. There is a narration as well where Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whenever he would begin to recite the Quran, whenever he would begin to read the Quran, he would begin by saying, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And scholars are in agreement that this is something that is highly recommended to say. It's mustahab. However, it's very important to recognize it is not mandatory, which is to say that if one does not say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim before you begin to recite some Quran, this will not be sinful, right? Something that is mandatory and is not done, then this is sinful when we do not do this. But when you have something that's beloved like this, we have something that is a sunnah, that is righteous, that's a good deed, but is not done, this is not going to be something that is sinful. And then for the actual salah itself, because when we recite Quran, it may either be when we're sitting by ourselves, we're just reading the Quran from the book itself, from the mushaf, or it could be during the actual salah. And when it's done during the actual salah, this is something that's done very quietly. When you see the imam begin salah, he goes, Allahu Akbar, and you don't hear him recite anything until he says either Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim or Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And so this is something that during the salah, it is said, but it is said quietly. Okay? So after we have the ta'awudh or a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, the next thing that we say is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The term for this in Arabic is tasmiyah or basmala. Basmala is the more commonly used term. It's kind of like an acronym for what it is. It is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Basmala is like ICOM is ICOM, Islamic Center of Owings Mills. ICOM is, Basmala is just kind of like an acronym for Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. What is it? What does it refer to? This is going to be probably the majority of what we go over for the rest of the day today. So we have something that looks like it's 4 words, but it's actually 5. We have the ba, we have ism, we have Allah, we have Ar-Rahman, we have Ar-Rahim. These are 5 different words. So the first is ba, right? Basm or bism, right? This is the ba is what it begins with. And the ba is a standalone character. It is a preposition or a harf jar, as we would say. And what it means is generally it's going to mean with. So Bismillah, with the name of Allah. However, ba can have more specific meanings as well. One of them is an attached meaning it's what we call ba musahaba, that the ba of linkage. So when you're saying it with this ba in mind, it's that everything I do is linked to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything that I do is connected to Him. It goes back to Him. And then we also could say it's ba al-isti'ana, that it's the ba of Allah is helping with everything that I do. When I begin something, I'm doing it with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that I am seeking His help through using His name. As a means of using His name, this is something that I'm hoping to get His help from. Ism means, it's literally an ism, and it means name, right? It just means that it's name. And then we have Allah. Allah is Lafdul Jalala, as it's called, that His greatest name, or Ismul Dhat, the name of God Himself. And there's a lot of conversation about where the name Allah comes from. We're not going to go into that aspect of it right now. But the next 2 words, they come from the same root, but they have different meanings, right? We would say that mushtaqani min al-rahma. They're both derived from the same root letters. That ra, ha, mim. Rahma is the base root. So what is Rahma? Typically, somebody asks you, what is Rahma? Who is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim? You're going to say, oh, He's the most merciful, right? Because Rahma refers to mercy. Mercy, though, that's one side of it, but it's also something that binds people together. You understand? So the womb of the mother is called the Rahim, because it is what binds the mother and the child together. Both of them come from the word mercy, right? So whether it's Rahman or Rahim, both come from the same root of Rahma. But we're going to get into some rules about the Arabic language here so that we can understand it a little better. So the first is that every single root has a base. They have a trilateral, quadrilateral base. Typically, there are some quintilateral bases, but there's not that many. There's not even that many quadrilateral basis. So 3 root letters is trilateral root verbs. What does this mean? It means every word in Arabic, not every word, majority of words in Arabic have 3 root letters that you have to look for. So for example, when we say Ar-Rahman, we have Ra, Ha, Mim. These are the root letters. Now, there are additional letters in that as well. There's an Alif and there's a Noon that are additional. But these are what we call Za'ida. That's additional. And so these letters are not necessarily part of the root itself. So, for example, another one is Nasran, right? We've probably heard this term, Nasran, right? And so this is just doing the same thing. I'm taking out Ra, Ha, Mim. I'm putting Nun, Sad, Ra instead, right? So these are ways that we have, you have to always understand and find the root letters of every word. Then Arabic is a language of patterns, right? It's a language of patterns. So you take the roots and put them onto these patterns. So fa'lan is replace the fa'ain lam with ra ha mim, you get rahman. And this pattern is of rahman when we have the verb rahman, which is the root letters of rahama, right? Which is rahma. The root letters meaning mercy, something that binds things together. Then you put it on this pattern and you put it the ra in the place of fa. In the pattern of fa'lan, you replace the fa with the ra, you replace the ain with the ha, and you replace the lam with the meme. So now you get Rahman. This refers to an abundance. Okay. It refers to a mercy that's like an abundance of mercy, not just like a little bit. It's not just like it's not just that I have a couple books, I have a lot of books, right? That's what it's coming to. And when we talk about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is something that is so great. It's so significant in its number that it covers everything around us. It knows no bounds. There is no end to it in sight that we could ever even begin to fathom. It covers and surrounds everything. In a hadith Qudsi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna rahmati ghalabat ghadabi, that my mercy overcomes my wrath. It is that all-encompassing that even Allah's mercy overcomes and surrounds his wrath. Then we have the pattern of fa'il, which is what rahim comes from. So again, replacing the fa'ain lam in fa'il with ra ha mim, and we get rahim. This refers to a mercy that is constant. Someone possessing a quality that is a constant level of mercy. They are always merciful. And this is together, these come together to refer to one whose mercy is great, but is also constant. It's always there. It's always around you. It's always present in terms of how much it is, but also present because of its constancy. This is one way that some of the scholars have brought the connection between these two words. Another, Imam Baydawi, Qadi Baydawi, he says that Rahman refers to alladhi yarham al-mu'min wal-kafir, the one who shows mercy to the believer as well as the disbeliever. He's merciful to everyone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives food. There is no delineation in terms of, oh, believers get food and non-believers don't get food, or believers, get clothes and non-believers don't get clothes. Everybody is given these things. Everybody is, of course, those who don't get it in terms of the blessings that they have, but everybody has access to these things, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, with Allah's permission. So nobody is restricted from these things because Allah said, no, this is only for believers, this is only for non-believers. But Rahim then can come to give reference to a special mercy that is only for believers. So Rahman being a mercy that is for all things, all living creatures, believers, non-believers, human beings who are Muslim, who are not. And then Rahim, which is specifically for those who are Muslimin. Another way the scholars have looked at it is Rahman is the one who is merciful in this life and in the next. So he's merciful in this life and shows mercy to those of this life as well as those of the next life. And Rahim then is that mercy that is specifically reserved for the hereafter. And who are the people who receive mercy in the hereafter? They're the believers, right? They are the believers. Lastly, Rahman is a name that has never been used to describe anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says, قُلِ ادْعُوا قُلْ عِدُوا اللَّهَ أَوْ عِدُوا الرَّحْمَنِ أَيًّمَّا تَدْعُوا فَلَهُ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى. Allah says that call out to Allah or call out to Ar-Rahman. Whatever you call for him are the best names. But specifically, he makes it very clear. Nobody is called Allah, right? We don't call anyone Allah. We don't say, oh, this person is Allah. Na'udhu billah, right? We say, however, for example, someone might be Abdul Rahman, right? But this is very important. We do not say that someone is Rahman, because this is a name that is specifically for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is exclusive for him. It is not to be used by any other human being, any person, because this is something that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possesses. As for Rahim, this has been used to refer to others. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the end of Surah At-Tawbah. We actually just recited it the other day in Surah At-Tarawih. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he is Rahim, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, harisun alayhi ma anittum, that he has his mercy for you. He's so concerned about you. Harisun alaykum azizun alayhi ma anittum, that he is so concerned for you, and he has this level of mercy, Ra'ufun Rahim, that he is so merciful and kind and loving for you as believers. And in Surah Al-Fath, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the companions saying Ruhama bainahum, Ruhama being a plural of Rahim. So this is something that is used for the Sahaba. So what we understand then is that, okay, when you talk about Rahim, this can be used as a name for someone, right? Someone can be Rahim. An individual can be described as Rahim. There's nobody who has necessarily like a restriction on being called Rahim. It's a name you can use. When you say Ar-Rahim, then you must attach Abd. You must attach Abd. So you say Rahim, but then you say Ar-Rahim. Now you have to say Abd ar-Rahim, not solely. You cannot just simply say Ar-Rahim for a name. You can say Abd ar-Rahim. But for Rahman, the only one who is worthy of this name is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether it's used as Rahman, Ar-Rahman, it doesn't matter. Rahman is a name that is solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This can be a level of blasphemy to call anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Rahman. So when we say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, you are saying that I am beginning with, I'm starting with, this task that I'm doing, it's beginning with the name of the one who is very, very merciful, very, very compassionate, constantly compassionate. So think about what that says then. For somebody, some of the scholars have actually mentioned, Inna Bismillah, tadammanat jami'u shar, that this Bismillah can actually be the summary of the entire religion. Bismillah itself can be the summary of the entire religion because it mentions Allah's name, right? That Allah himself, this name of Allah some of the scholars have mentioned that its origin refers to al-ma'bud bil-haq, that he is the one deserving, absolutely deserving of worship. Then it mentions the attributes of God, of his mercy, right? So then if you begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who requires to be worshipped, the one who must be worshipped, and then Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, if you mess up, Allah is forgiving. And it also reminds us to be merciful to others, right? It reminds us to be kind, to be soft, to be gentle to others. So the summary of the entire religion, what is it? Worship God and be good to others. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Worship God and be good to others, right? Think about how simple it is that we can combine all of this and make that the summary of the religion. When you say worship God, also it's talking about bringing all these different aspects of our deen, the things that we do when it comes to our shahada, when it comes to our salah, when it comes to our sawm, when it comes to our zakat, when it comes to our hajj. All these things can be summed up in worship God. Because to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you must do so in the way that he has commanded us to. And we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to this through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and what it is that we are taught to do. So worship God in all the ways that you're supposed to as a believer and be good to others, right? He is good to you, be good to others. He is kind and merciful and forgiving to you. Be kind and merciful and forgiving to other people. Why is it then that we hear both A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim as well as Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim together? And this is because the Prophet ﷺ used to do this. There's a narration where Anas radiallahu anhu talks about how once he was with the Prophet ﷺ. بينما نحن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. We were with the Prophet ﷺ, and he got very quiet and he lowered his head for a little bit. And then not long after, he raised his head up again and was smiling at the companions, smiling at the other companions who were there. They said, Ya Rasulullah, ma tabassamak? What's making you smile? What is it that's happened? And the Prophet ﷺ said, a surah was just revealed to me in A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar. So here, what does the Prophet ﷺ do? He begins with the ta'awudh, with saying A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, and then he says Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So this is something we learned from the Prophet ﷺ. Is the basmala an ayah of the Quran? Is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim an ayah of the Quran? This is really a conversation that comes up as it relates to Surah Fatihah, because there's a significant difference of opinion. In terms of the rest of the Quran, whenever you see it in the surah, every surah has Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim at the beginning of it. And while it's not part of the surah, it's generally understood to be part of the Quran. So there's 114 surahs in the Quran. 113 of them begin with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Surah At-Tawbah is the one that does not. However, fun fact, if you ever want to have some kind of trivia, you can know that in spite of the fact that there's 114 chapters and only 113 have Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, the term itself, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, actually comes in the Quran 114 times. This is because in Surah Al-Nahl, and you'll probably, if you've read through that chapter, you see that it kind of actually, usually the Mus'haf, they change the text up. But in Surah Al-Nahl, it comes as a verse that the letter is being sent from Sulaiman alayhi salam to Bilqis, the empress of that land, and it begins with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So in spite of the fact there being 114 surahs with only 113 having Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim to begin with, there is, once it comes in the Quran, in the actual text itself, and that is in Surah Al-Nahl. So it comes 114 times in total. But outside of that specific instance, it is more of an introduction to every surah. It's a preface. It's something that is, how you begin it as a custom and part of and what we see from the Prophet ﷺ. With Surah Al-Fatihah, we'll get into that inshallah a little bit more next week, but specifically in general with the Quran itself. What is the virtue of saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim? Well, Ali radiallahu anh said that it is the remedy for everything that ails people. And it helps every single remedy that you utilize in your life. So in and of itself, he's saying it's a remedy, that it has shifa'un linnas. It is something that can give people a remedy. Now, it's not to say that you say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim and all of a sudden you don't need to take the Tylenol or the Advil or whatever, moxicillin that you're taking. There's a process to these things. And to simply say, oh, I'm just going to say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, this is not how we approach things. There is a process of getting to a point where perhaps one's spiritual state is that closely connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that very well may occur, where someone can simply say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them healing through that. But don't expect that just because you say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is suddenly going to heal whatever illness you're dealing with, right? But again, the key point is that it can be that. It can do that for people. And it also is something that aids in every remedy. So when you're taking the medicine, you get sick, and subhanAllah, so many people right now are sick. When you're taking the medicine, you say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim before you take it, and then you sip it, or then you take the pills, or whatever it might be, right? This is something that gives strength. It aids the remedies that you utilize in your life. By saying Rahman, it gives strength to the believers because it's the unique name of Allah alone. One of the most interesting aspects is that there's a story from the Treaty of Hudaybiyah that from the Quraysh, they sent a individual who was negotiating on behalf of the Quraysh for this treaty. And the Prophet ﷺ, having come to do Umrah, he wasn't ready to fight, but he said to them, okay, you come, you give me your terms, we'll agree to whatever you say. So now Suhail ibn Amr, who is this man who comes as the delegate for the Quraysh, he comes and he begins to start to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. Ali radiallahu anh is actually writing it because, of course, the Prophet ﷺ is unable to read or write. When Ali radiallahu anh begins, he writes Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Suhail ibn Amr says, we don't recognize this Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. We don't understand this. This was something that was foreign to the Quraysh. It was foreign to people, specifically Ar-Rahman, that we don't know this name. This is not something we've ever seen before. We don't recognize this term of Ar-Rahman. We don't know who this is, right? So with this, it's a very unique statement. It's a very unique word for us as believers. And it's the unique name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. As for Rahim, it's an important reminder for us to be faithful, right? Because Allah is constantly merciful. And we should have that level of constancy, because man la yarham la yurham. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever doesn't show mercy, Allah will not show them mercy. So we need to be constant in our approach to mercy. We need to be faithful, repentant people who are looking to always bring goodness. As I always say, and I'll say it here again, the Muslim is a force for good. And this is what we do as believers. We are constant in our efforts to try and bring good about. So it's a boost to our faith when we can hear this aspect. Bismillahir Rahman, my Rahman. This is for me. This is a term that's unique to me and me as a believer alone. Nobody else recognizes this. It gives us strength in that. And then Al-Rahim gives me this boost. Allah is always merciful. Even when I make mistakes, even when I slip up, He's always ready to give me that forgiveness as long as I ask for it. And what a blessing for us to be able to have this, and to be able to call out to an ilah, to call out to an Allah who is so merciful and has given us such tools to be able to utilize in your life, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And we'll conclude inshallah with this. Make sure to increase your usage of Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Not only is this something that will bring barakah into whatever it is that you do, it'll make better what it is that you're doing, but it also will prevent shaitan. It'll keep Iblis away from the goodness of your life. It'll keep him away from consuming and taking part in your food or your drinks in whatever way that is, in whatever metaphysical way that we do not fully comprehend that is. It prevents him from that, and that's all that matters. So we say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim as we begin to eat, when we end our fast, right? When we end our fast and break into it, we say our du'as, but also say before you begin, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, as you're taking that first sip of water or whatever you might be drinking. If you have some fancy sherbet or something like that you're drinking, before you take that sip, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and reflect on what it means. Reflect on what it is that this terminology, that this phrase itself gives us as believers, and make that something even then as you begin your fast. When the time comes in, you're looking at your watch, like, okay, 7:15 and 57 seconds, 58 seconds, 59 seconds. The time comes in. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I'm beginning my fast in the name of Allah. With Allah, I'm beginning my fast. But remember, musahaba, right? Connection, having that connection to Him, and making sure that I'm having that linkage to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whatever it is that I do. Be sure, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, to try and increase your usage of the term. Opening a door, taking a step, coming into your home. When you step into your home, say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And also for your family, whenever you step in, say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah loudly. Whether people are there or not doesn't matter, because the angels then receive that greeting. So as you step into your home, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, right? Reciting this for people of your home, and inshallah then your family will respond to you, and you begin your greetings with barakah towards one another, right? With goodness towards one another. When it comes to getting into your car, say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim as you open the door. As you sit down, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. As you start the car, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. It's a constant thing. Just as Allah's mercy is constant, we should seek to make Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim something constant in our lives. At the very least, if it's too difficult to constantly say the long version, at the very least say Bismillah as you begin. Bismillah. Bismillah. Everything that you do, when you open any doors, when you go anywhere, the exception being the bathroom, and there we say Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khabathi wal khaba'ith, right? We make a specific dua for the bathroom. Any doors that you open, any places that are pure that you go, say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim when you do this. And this will not only bring you barakah, but it'll also increase your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether you think you're worthy of it or not is irrelevant. Whether you pray all 5 salah a day or not is irrelevant. You can start with this by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim and growing that connection. And I promise you, if you start with that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open the doors for you to come closer to Him, to get to that point where you're on your 5 salat every single day without any issues, where you're reading Quran more consistently, where you're getting to that point, bidnillahi ta'ala, where even just saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim can be something that gives you that shifa, gives you that healing on when you need it. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq and to forgive us for all of our shortcomings and to make this fast one that is accepted. Inshallah, next Tuesday, we'll be back again and we'll begin with the rest of what we're going to go over. It's going to be at 6:30 or 6:45. Just keep an eye out for, inshallah, flyer. But we'll begin at those times, inshallah. And I'll see everybody tonight at Salat al-Tarawih. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.